Something strange happened on your last trip to the store. The price of your favorite coffee was a little higher. The sneakers you wanted were out of stock. The new television you had been saving for was suddenly more expensive. You might not have connected these small problems to a much bigger story. This story is happening far away, on the world's vast oceans. It is a story about giant ships, metal boxes, and a price shock that is changing everything. We are living through a massive disruption in global trade. The cost of moving goods around the world has skyrocketed. This is not a small jump, it is a seismic shift. The heart of this story is the humble shipping container. For decades, this simple metal box has been the silent engine of globalization. It made shipping cheap, reliable, and efficient. It allowed a t-shirt made in Vietnam to be sold for a few dollars in Ohio. It let a German car company build parts in Mexico and assemble them in South Carolina. This system worked so well that we took it for granted. But the COVID-19 pandemic broke the machine. Suddenly, the cost to send one container across the ocean jumped from $2,000 to over $20,000 on some routes. The invisible network that supplied our lives became very visible and very expensive. This price shock is not just a problem for big companies. It is a problem for everyone. It affects small business owners trying to keep their shops open. It impacts factory managers struggling to get the parts they need. It touches families trying to manage their household budgets as prices for everyday items climb higher and higher. The entire global economy is built on the predictable, low-cost movement of goods. When that foundation cracks, the effects ripple outwards, touching every corner of our lives in ways we are only just beginning to understand. This is more than a headline. It is a kitchen table issue. In this essay, we will unpack this complex problem in a simple way. We will follow a clear path to understand what is happening. First, we will look at the problem itself, the shocking rise in prices and its real-world effects. We will see how this is not just a number on a chart, but a force reshaping our economy. Then, we will dig into the causes, exploring why this happened in the first place. Finally, we will turn to the solutions. We will outline practical fixes that can help us navigate this crisis. We will look at what governments, companies, and the shipping industry itself can do to build a more resilient system for the future. You might be asking yourself, why should I care about the cost of shipping a container? The answer is simple. Nearly everything you own, use, or eat has spent time inside one of these metal boxes. Look around your room. The phone in your hand, the clothes in your closet, the furniture you sit on, they all likely traveled across an ocean. The global supply chain is like the circulatory system of our modern world. Shipping containers are the red blood cells, carrying essential goods to every part of the body. When the flow of these containers is disrupted, the whole system feels the strain. It's a silent tax on everything. This is not just a temporary headache. The container price shock is a major driver of inflation. When it costs 10 times more to ship a product, that cost does not just disappear. The company that makes the product passes some of that cost to the wholesaler. The wholesaler passes it to the retailer. And finally, the retailer passes it on to you, the customer. This is why you are seeing higher prices for so many different things, from bicycles to books to building materials. It is a direct line from a congested port in Shanghai to the price tag on a shelf in your local store. Understanding this connection is key to understanding our current economic climate. Furthermore, this crisis reveals a deep vulnerability in our interconnected world. We have built an incredibly efficient system for making and moving things. But we have learned that this system is also very fragile. It depends on everything working perfectly all the time. A pandemic, a blocked canal, or a labor shortage at a single port can create a global traffic jam. This forces businesses to rethink their strategies. Do they keep making products far from home, or do they bring production closer? Do they rely on just-in-time delivery, or do they need to hold more inventory? These are big questions that will shape the future of business and jobs. This essay promises to give you clarity. We will not use confusing jargon or complicated economic theories. Instead, we will use plain language and real examples to explain what is going on. We will follow a simple structure: problem, cause, and fix. By the end, you will understand the forces that are making your life more expensive. You will know why this is happening and what can be done about it. The scale of the container price shock is difficult to overstate. For years, the cost of shipping a standard 40-foot container from Asia to North America hovered around a predictable $2,000. It was a stable, almost boring number that businesses could build their entire financial models around. But in 2020, that stability vanished. The price began to climb, first slowly, then with breathtaking speed. By the middle of 2021, that same container journey could cost an astonishing $20,000 or more. This was not a ripple. It was a financial tsunami, washing over the calm waters of global trade and leaving chaos in its wake. This tenfold increase was unprecedented in modern shipping history. These soaring prices were not the only problem. The reliability of the entire system collapsed. Before the pandemic, a container ship traveling from Shanghai to Los Angeles would take about 2 weeks with a high degree of certainty. Businesses could plan their inventory with precision, a strategy known as just-in-time. But suddenly, that 2-week journey stretched to 4 weeks, then 6, then even longer. Ships were forced to wait for days, sometimes weeks, just to get a berth at a congested port. Delivery schedules became meaningless. A shipment promised for September might not arrive until November, throwing production plans and retail promotions into complete disarray. Let's look at some simple figures to grasp the magnitude of this disruption. Studies showed that at the peak of the crisis, over 10% of the world's entire shipping capacity was stuck, waiting outside ports. That's hundreds of massive vessels, each carrying thousands of containers, effectively turned into floating warehouses. The average delay for a container shipment globally increased by several days. For some key routes, the delays were much worse. This gridlock meant that not only were goods not reaching their destinations, but the empty containers needed to ship new goods were not getting back to their points of origin in Asia. This created a vicious cycle. The more ships that were delayed, the more congested the ports became. The more congested the ports became, the longer the delays grew. And as delays grew longer, the effective supply of ships and containers shrank, even though the physical number of them had not changed. This scarcity, combined with surging demand, was the perfect recipe for the explosive price increases we saw. The entire global logistics network, a system fine-tuned for maximum efficiency over decades, had been thrown into a state of extreme inefficiency, and everyone was about to pay the price for it. To understand the real-world impact, let's consider the story of a small business owner. Imagine a woman who runs a boutique furniture store. She built her business by sourcing unique, handcrafted chairs and tables from a small supplier in Vietnam. For years, she could import a container full of furniture for about $3,000. This cost was manageable and allowed her to offer beautiful products at a competitive price. She knew her shipping costs down to the dollar and could plan her inventory for the busy holiday season 6 months in advance. Her business was stable, predictable, and growing steadily in her community. Then the price shock hit. When she went to order her next container, her freight forwarder gave her a stunning new quote: $22,000. This was not just a small increase she could absorb. The shipping cost for a single chair was now greater than the cost to manufacture the chair itself. She was faced with an impossible choice. Now, let's move from the storefront to the factory floor. Consider a mid-sized factory in the American Midwest that assembles lawnmowers. The factory is a model of efficiency. It employs hundreds of local workers and has a well-oiled production line. However, this production line depends on a steady stream of components sourced from around the globe. The engines come from Japan, the wheels from China, and the electronic control panels from Taiwan. For decades, these parts arrived exactly when needed, allowing the factory to operate without having to store massive, costly inventories. The supply chain crisis brought this finely tuned machine to a screeching halt. Ultimately, the ripples of this crisis reached every single one of us as consumers. You went to a big box store to buy a new bicycle for your child's birthday. You found the model you wanted, but the shelf was empty. A store employee told you they had no idea when the next shipment would arrive. The global shipping traffic jam meant that containers full of bikes were sitting on ships or stuck in ports, thousands of miles away. The simple act of buying a common product had become a game of chance. This led to widespread stock shortages for an incredible variety of goods. It wasn't just bicycles. Gaming consoles, couches, car parts, pet food, store shelves that were once reliably full started to have noticeable gaps. A shopper looking at empty shelves in a supermarket or retail store, illustrating product shortages and consumer frustration. And for the goods that were available, the prices were often higher. A family looking to buy a new refrigerator found that the model they wanted cost 20% more than it did a year earlier. Part of this increase was due to the higher cost of steel and components, but a significant chunk was directly from shipping. The impact was felt most acutely by families with lower or fixed incomes. For them, rising prices for essential goods are not a minor inconvenience. They are a serious financial burden. The container price shock was not an abstract economic concept. It was a tangible force that made it harder for ordinary people to make ends meet. Section 5. The domino effect on the global economy. Retailers, factories, consumers. They are interconnected pieces of a larger, more troubling picture. When these issues happen at a massive scale, they create a domino effect that destabilizes the entire global economy. The first and most obvious domino to fall is inflation. When the cost of moving goods increases by a factor of 10, it acts as a universal tax on physical trade. That cost gets embedded in the price of nearly every imported product, leading to persistent, widespread inflation that central banks have struggled to control. The second domino is the disruption of production and investment. When businesses cannot rely on their supply chains, they become hesitant to invest and expand. A company is unlikely to build a new factory if it cannot be sure it will get the parts needed to operate it. This uncertainty chills economic activity and slows down growth. Instead of focusing on innovation and creating new products, companies are forced into a defensive posture, spending their time and resources simply managing logistical chaos. This misallocation of effort is a major drag on productivity and economic progress for everyone: shipping, manufacturing, retail, household finance. A third domino is the reconfiguration of global supply chains themselves. For decades, the trend was towards globalization, sourcing parts and manufacturing goods wherever it was cheapest. The price shock has forced a dramatic rethinking of this strategy. Companies are now actively exploring reshoring. Companies are now actively exploring nearshoring. While this might make supply chains more resilient, it also comes with its own set of challenges. It can lead to higher production costs, which may keep consumer prices elevated for the long term. Finally, all of this creates significant geopolitical tension. Countries may start to see control over shipping lanes and port capacity as a matter of national security. This could lead to more protectionist trade policies and a move away from the cooperative global system we have known. The humble shipping container, once a symbol of a connected and flattened world, has now become a source of economic friction and strategic competition. The problem is far bigger than just the price of a metal box. It is about the stability and future direction of the global economic order. Section 1. The perfect storm. A surge in demand. The first and most powerful force behind the container price shock was an unprecedented surge in consumer demand. When the COVID-19 pandemic swept across the globe, economies went into lockdown. People stopped spending money on services like restaurant meals, movie tickets, travel live events. Instead, they stayed home. With their disposable income redirected, they began buying physical goods at a staggering rate. They bought new laptops, monitors, they purchased exercise equipment, kitchen appliances, furniture. This wasn't a small shift, it was a massive seismic rotation in spending habits. This sudden pivot from services to goods created a tidal wave of demand that overwhelmed the global supply chain. Most of these goods, electronics, furniture, clothing, toys, are manufactured in Asia. Factories in China, factories in Vietnam, and elsewhere. These products headed to consumers in North America, Europe. The shipping industry, which operates on long-term capacity plans, was simply not prepared. It was like a million people all deciding to leave a stadium through a single exit at the exact same moment. Data from this period clearly illustrates the scale of this buying spree. E-commerce sales, for example, jumped by more than 30% in the United States in 2020. This was the biggest year-over-year increase in 2 decades. Consumers were clicking buy with a frequency never seen before, and each click translated into another box that needed to be packed, loaded into a container, and shipped across an ocean. The system, which was built for a steady, predictable flow of goods, was now being asked to handle a frantic, record-breaking volume. The pressure on every link in the chain became immense. Factory floor final delivery truck. This surge in demand was the initial spark that lit the fire. It created a situation where there was far more cargo to be moved than available slots on ships. This fundamental imbalance between supply and demand is the classic recipe for a price increase in any market. Shipping lines found themselves in a position where they could charge almost any price, and desperate importers, facing empty shelves, production stoppages, would have to pay it. The predictable, low-cost shipping environment vanished, replaced by a frenzied auction where the highest bidder won the limited space on a ship. Section 2. Where have all the containers gone? While demand for shipping was soaring, a critical problem emerged with container supply. The world wasn't short of steel boxes. The problem was, they were in the wrong places. A shipping container is like a taxi. It's only useful when available to pick up a new fare. During the crisis, millions of containers were taken out of service. They were stranded far from Asian manufacturing hubs. That created an acute shortage of available containers, even though totals stayed the same. One big reason, chaos at ports in North America. Another, chaos at ports in Europe. Ships arriving faced long delays unloading due to congestion. Once unloaded, containers were moved inland to warehouses and to distribution centers. Those facilities were overwhelmed. There was a shortage of truck drivers to move containers. There was a shortage of warehouse workers to unload them. As a result, containers full of goods sat for weeks on truck chassis, or they sat in storage yards, waiting to be emptied. They were being used as temporary storage instead of being returned. This delay in emptying and returning containers had a massive ripple effect. Normally, a container might be returned to a port within a few days. During the crisis, turnaround stretched to several weeks, or even months. For every extra day a container sat idle in a yard near Chicago or in a warehouse outside London, it was one less container for a factory in Shenzhen. The global pool of available containers shrank, creating fierce competition. That scarcity drove up prices in 2 ways. First, the cost to lease or buy a new container skyrocketed. Before the pandemic, a new container cost about $2,500. During the crisis, it sold for over $6,000. Second, shipping lines started charging hefty fees for late returns. Those fees are called demurrage charges and detention charges. These fees could run into hundreds of dollars per day per container. The simple metal box, once cheap and abundant, had become scarce and valuable. Section 3. The Great Traffic Jam. Port congestion. The surge in demand and the dislocation of containers converged on the world's ports, creating unprecedented traffic jams. Ports are the critical interchange points in the global supply chain, the place where goods move from sea to land. They are complex ecosystems of cranes, trucks, rail lines, workers, all choreographed in perfect harmony. When that choreography was disrupted by the sheer volume of cargo, the entire system seized up. Ports like Los Angeles and Long Beach, which handle about 40% of U.S. containerized imports, became global symbols of gridlock. At the peak, 100 or more massive container ships were anchored off Southern California, waiting to dock and unload. This was a stunning sight. Each ship was a floating warehouse, holding thousands of containers filled with electronics, filled with apparel. They sat in a queue that stretched for weeks. Goods weren't reaching stores, factories lacked parts, and ships were taken out of circulation, shrinking global shipping capacity. The port was the bottleneck where those pressures were visible. Congestion wasn't just on the water, it was on land too. Unloaded containers then faced more hurdles. Container yards were overflowing. There weren't enough truck chassis, the wheeled frames used to haul containers, to move boxes out of the port. There weren't enough truck drivers to pick them up. Rail yards were backed up, unable to handle containers bound inland. The port became a logistical nightmare, a massive pile-up beyond capacity. This gridlock hit shipping costs and reliability directly. Shipping lines had to account for multi-million-dollar vessels idling for weeks. They passed costs on as higher freight rates and new congestion surcharges. The unpredictable delays made planning impossible. Arrival dates became moving targets, wrecking production schedules and sales plans. Port congestion wasn't just a symptom, it amplified the entire crisis. Behind the machinery of global trade, the ships, cranes, containers, is a vast workforce of people. The crisis highlighted how much the system depends on them. Labor shortages could bring it to its knees. The pandemic caused disruptions across the entire labor force. Port workers, truck drivers, warehouse employees faced health risks, quarantine rules, and burnout. Outbreaks at a port terminal, a distribution center could lead to sudden shutdowns and immediate backlogs. The system had very little slack to absorb these human disruptions. While demand surged and ports jammed, the global fleet couldn't expand quickly enough. Building a new large container ship is not a simple task. It's a massive industrial project. It takes 2 to 3 years from order to service. The shipping industry is highly cyclical. In the years before the pandemic, it suffered from overcapacity and low freight rates. That led to a slowdown in new orders as companies managed existing fleets. When demand exploded in 2020, shipping lines couldn't just produce more ships. They were running a fleet calibrated for a pre-pandemic world. Port congestion made the problem worse. When many ships sit waiting outside ports, effective capacity shrinks dramatically. A ship anchored for 3 weeks isn't moving cargo. Experts estimated port delays removed more than 10% of global capacity, the equivalent of scrapping hundreds of vessels. Section 1. Untangling the knot. A 3-level approach. After diagnosing the problem and understanding its complex causes, we now turn to the most important question: what can be done? The container price shock was not caused by a single failure, so it cannot be solved by a single fix. Untangling this global knot requires a coordinated effort from everyone involved. There is no magic wand to instantly return shipping prices to pre-pandemic levels. Instead, we must think about solutions on 3 distinct but interconnected levels: the shipping industry, government policymakers, individual companies that rely on global trade. Each has a crucial role to play in building a more resilient system. First, the shipping industry must take the lead. Carriers, port operators, logistics firms, they manage the ships, containers, terminals. They can improve coordination, invest in technology, adjust operations to create a smoother flow of goods, better data sharing, smarter incentives, move from reactive fighting fires to proactive anticipation and mitigation. Second, governments and public policymakers, ports, Railways. Drive long-term investments to expand capacity and modernize gateways. Streamline regulations, customs processes, address systemic issues like labor disputes. Ensure fair competition. Set the rules and make public investments so the private sector functions effectively. Finally, individual companies, small retailers, large manufacturers, rethink fragile long-distance supply chains. Diversify suppliers. Hold more critical inventory. Be more flexible in how they move products. Companies that adapt will thrive in a more volatile environment. We will look at practical steps any business owner can take. By working together, these three groups can build a stronger, more dependable global trading system. The Great Container Price Shock has served as a powerful and painful wake-up call for the entire world. For decades, we built our global economy on a simple, unspoken promise: the cheap, reliable, invisible movement of goods. The crisis shattered this illusion. It revealed that the intricate system of ships, ports, and containers we depend on for nearly everything we own is far more fragile than we ever imagined. The problem was not just a temporary price spike. It was a symptom of a deeper vulnerability in the foundations of our interconnected world. We saw how a perfect storm of surging consumer demand, a misallocation of containers, gridlocked ports, and a shortage of ships and workers all collided at once. Understanding this chain reaction is the first step toward ensuring it does not happen again. The time for reflection is over. The time for decisive action is now. This is a call to action for every leader in a position to effect change. To policymakers, we urge you to treat our ports and logistics networks as the critical national security assets they are. Fund the next generation of infrastructure. Streamline the flow of trade through digitization. Work with international partners to establish clearer and fairer rules for global shipping. Do not wait for the next crisis to expose the weaknesses of the last one. To the leaders of the shipping and logistics industry, look beyond short-term profits and invest in the long-term health of the system. Embrace transparency. Build the digital platforms that will allow for genuine, end-to-end visibility. Collaborate to solve the systemic problems of container imbalances and port congestion. Your customers are not just numbers on a balance sheet. They are partners in a global enterprise. To business owners, the smallest startup to the largest corporation, the message is clear. Take control of your own destiny. The world has changed, and your strategies must change with it. Map your supply chains. Identify your vulnerabilities. Diversify your sourcing. Rethink your inventory models to build in buffers that can withstand shocks. Forge true partnerships with your logistics providers. The resilience you build into your business today is the best insurance you can have against the uncertainty of tomorrow. This is no longer just good practice. It is a matter of survival and a source of competitive advantage in a volatile world. Stronger, smarter, more equitable. The path forward requires commitment, investment, a shared understanding that we are all connected. A ship delayed on the other side of the world is no longer a distant problem. Its effects are felt at our local stores and on our factory floors. By working together now, we can ease the volatility, mitigate the impact of future shocks, ensure that the engines of global trade continue to power a more prosperous and stable future for everyone. The work begins today.